Greetings, one and all, and welcome. Welcome to the Cloud English Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about your English learning lifestyle. Now, if you don't know what that means or that doesn't make sense, don't worry. All will be clear. All will be explained. I'm going to be talking through how to build an English lifestyle. I'm going to be explaining an example that sticks out to me immediately that I think people could model. I'm going to be giving you some ideas for how to build a lifestyle. We're also going to spend a bit of time talking about a very interesting phrasal verb. So make sure you stick around for that. We're going to be getting to that after we talk about lifestyle. A few things right at the top. Number one, if you have questions about your English lifestyle, your habits, grammar, idioms, whatever, but if you want to keep it on topic, that's probably a good idea. Feel free to pop those in the chat if you're watching live, but if you're listening later, you can put them in the comments as well. I do read all the comments. Now, if you're listening to this, congratulations. If you're not, and you want to listen sometimes, you can go to any place where you would find podcasts like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and you can just type in Cloud English. And there you can actually listen. Maybe you're on a walk. Maybe you're taking care of 9 babies. Maybe you're at the zoo. I don't know what you're doing, but some people like to listen instead of watch. It allows you to be a little bit more mobile. If you haven't already done so, right at the top of the show, it would be most appreciated for those watching if you could hit the like button or the thumbs up button, depending on where you're watching, and subscribe or follow. That's a small action you can take, which really helps out the show. So please do that. That is most appreciated. You can grab a free English course in the links in the description. Natural English Conversations. That course is available as usual for free. That's a great starter course getting into my other stuff. It's a good way to sort of get a feel for the types of courses I make. Actually, not a great way because it's a different style than most of the other courses, but I think it's a good teaser at least for my teaching style. If you are interested in joining an English learning community, we have a Discord community that is also in the links in the description. I'll be opening up the voice channel later in case anyone is brave enough to say words on the record. I'm not, and yet I'm here. If you're interested in chatting, having conversations, sharing stuff, learning English, you can join the community for free. For now, it's free. It's a pretty casual, informal place, and there's no pressure there. I'm just there as a participant. I'm not there lecturing every day or something. So manage your expectations, I would say. But still, I think it's good. We've had some really good discussions there, some arguments, some debates, valuable things shared. So that's the stuff I wanted to talk about. Right off the bat, we have people joining already, which is fantastic. And I also see that Luba's here. Luba, if you're interested in hopping in the Discord later for the voice part, I'm very keen to hear about your English learning lifestyle because I think you've done a really great job of building one. So maybe in about 15 minutes if you're interested. No pressure, no pressure. I'll be opening that up pretty soon. Okay, so we're going to kick it off by talking about how to build a lifestyle, building an English learning lifestyle. So we're going to hop over to our slides and get into it. So why should we start thinking about having an English learning lifestyle? And why does your lifestyle matter? Think about it like this. If you want to force yourself to do something, you might be excited about making a big change in your life, fitness or language learning or food or whatever it is. You want to make a big change in your life. And so you're really excited about it. Then you take some steps, right? You start doing more of something. You start going to the gym once a week, whatever it is. You start doing more stuff. Then the feeling of excitement wanes. And that was the thing that pushed you to do those things. And so as the feeling of excitement and enthusiasm goes down, so does the activity until it stops completely. So then you reflect on the things that you do kind of automatically as part of your life. Brushing your teeth is hopefully one of those things. I hope, right? And maybe taking out the trash, getting to work on time, maybe watching movies, doing a bit of reading. Let's take reading. If you read every day, it's part of your life, it's part of what you do, right? A lot of people do that. I do that. Why do you do that? Is it because I'm going to read, I'm going to start reading, I'm super excited about it? Probably not. It's probably something that you just generally enjoy doing, and over time you've figured out how to work that into your life just naturally. That's the importance of lifestyle. If you're a reader, you've continued that habit of reading perhaps for many years. Not because you were ever super excited about it. We could call it a sort of low burn excitement. It's not super crazy excited because those things quickly fade, right? So the driving force behind your lifestyle are things you enjoy, things you want to do, but things that also kind of fit naturally into the other things that you're doing. And that's really important to keep in mind when it comes to building a lifestyle. And it matters in terms of English learning because if you can't figure out how to integrate your English learning into your lifestyle, you're very likely to give up very soon, okay? So, it's extremely important. It's very important to have a lifestyle because language is not separate from culture and your daily life. If you're learning 10 words a day, that's great, but that doesn't really connect to your life in any way. But if you're kind of immersed in the language and it's part of your lifestyle, you're using it every day, you're exposed to new bits of English from TV or articles or talking with people, then you're going to learn more of the context of those words, how they're used, right? And at the same time, some of the background of those words, the cultural part of those words, which is really important. You can't just learn words. You can't just learn grammar. You can't just learn pronunciation. You also have to be part of the culture to really understand the language. And as I said, it's very easy to give up on things that are not fun, where you get excited about it initially and then you give up, right? So if you want to have long-term success, you need consistency, like that book reading habit, right? So in order to have consistency, you need to work that into your lifestyle. Okay, so we talked about why it is. Now I'm going to be giving you a challenge. I'm going to challenge you in just a few minutes, but a couple other things I want to share with you first. And I think these are just important to keep in mind. And I'm going to give you a couple of recommendations too, so that you can really begin to do this. You can actually take action without being super excited about it to naturally work English learning, English immersion, English culture into your lifestyle. So maybe you're cooking lunch, you're making lunch, you listen to an audiobook or a podcast. Maybe that's just something you do. Now, you want to make sure it's not one that's too difficult that you can't understand, but you can understand it reasonably well. Do that. Or listen to this. Listen to this podcast. Whatever works for you, right? I'm not telling you what to listen to, but maybe you do that during lunch and that becomes your routine. That's just something you do. You combine activities. That's really important. Combine English learning with something you enjoy or something that you can get something else from. With cooking, you get nutrition and a little bit of English. But also, if you combine them with interests like video games, like online research into a specific topic that you're very interested in, right? Like reading books, book clubs, things like that. You're interested in that thing. How can you do that thing you're interested in English? I have a friend who was introduced to English through Magic the Gathering, the card game. Those cards, I mean, the English on those cards is crazy. They have a bunch of made-up words and strange sounding language, but it doesn't matter so much because that was his window into learning much more about the culture, learning much more about the language. He loved playing Magic. In order to play Magic well, he had to know English, he had to read the cards, understand the cards, and then through that kept exploring and kept going further and further, right? So that's another thing. Pursue your interests and don't stop. If you find another thing you're interested in, pursue that. And another thing, pursue that. And do it in English. Now, another thing you could consider is a side hustle. This is where you make a little extra money doing something. You could do that in your own language. You could do that also in English. There are a lot of ways to do it, right? But some things require English. There are many things you could do to make a bit of extra money on the internet, online. Some people in the United States, for example, they work as Uber drivers. Well, I'm not saying everyone is in the United States, but for example, right? You drive Uber in the United States, English is your second language. You might have conversations with passengers in your car. That's just one example, but you can certainly find things online, and that's actually a topic for a future video of side hustles you can do online in English. These are just things to consider as ways to combine something that is sustainable, something you can do consistently with English. Now, I want to give you a few ways to practice speaking that I think are helpful. And these are more connected with, these are specific recommendations. And I'm associating them with free and paid. So things you can do for free and things you can pay for. All right? These are things that may or may not work for you. These are just ideas for you to consider, okay? You might go to online meetups. There are many of them. You can find them. Search cities around the world, London, New York, California, whatever time zone works. Those meetups may be often meeting online, and they'll be discussing things, talking about things. That's a great way to practice. I've talked about this before, but free. Very importantly, free. Local meetups. Sometimes, all over the world, there are local meetups for people who are interested in a specific thing. I mentioned Magic the Gathering. There are Magic the Gathering meetups all over the world. People get together and play Magic. But there are meetups for all kinds of things. There are pub quizzes that you can go to. Even expat communities in other countries will have pub quizzes, and you could go there and learn about the culture and also interact with expats wherever you're living, right? So there are so many possibilities. Local meetups means meeting in person, right? Online gaming. If you play multiplayer games like Fortnite, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare, a lot of those have the ability to work with a team, communicate, actually speak, right? And that's a great way to practice. They're not going to give you feedback, of course, but you're just getting speaking practice in. Now, if you can, it's a great idea to find a speaking buddy. This is someone who maybe wants to learn a little bit about your language, or maybe someone who's also learning English who's about at your level, and I think that's okay too. I'm not saying you have to practice speaking with a native English speaker all the time. If you make yourself, or if you say to yourself, I must only practice with a native English speaking teacher, only, I think you're going to, if you want to do that for free, be very disappointed. It's going to be a very big challenge. Most of the time, it's challenging to build that kind of relationship. It's possible, but it's a lot of work. It's very challenging. Most of the time, if you want to speak, for example, with a teacher, you have to pay them. They're not going to do it for free. There's also Clubhouse. There's Discord. There are many Discord communities. I have one. There's not a lot of speaking, though, that happens in my Discord currently. That's something I want to do in the future more, but not too much speaking at the moment. It's mostly just chat conversations, which I think is fine too. And then Clubhouse is a speaking app. It was really popular for a while and then it kind of crashed, but there are still users, still groups, still plenty of ways to practice speaking. You can start a YouTube channel. I've talked about this many times before. Think about a topic you're interested in and actually start making videos about that, doing the voiceover or talking to the camera like I'm doing now. I know it's a daunting thing, but if you challenge yourself to do that, imagine how much progress you're going to make in your speaking. Now, I talked about a side hustle, but whether you do it for free, volunteering, for example, at a shelter or something like that, or you provide a service and you get paid, it's a great way to feed two birds with one scone. Make a little money, practice your English, and I probably shouldn't say this, but you can use job interviews as practice. Even if you have, I shouldn't say this because this is a waste of company resources, but you can accomplish a lot by going through an interview process. Even if you have no intention of changing jobs, you say, I'm going to apply for 30 positions. You may get 3 interviews. You then prepare for those 3 interviews. You see what kind of offers you can get. You challenge yourself to do the preparation, to get ready, to get familiar with the interview process. You go through 1 or 2 interviews or 3 for each one. Maybe you get an offer, maybe not, but the amount of sort of pressure and practice that you get from that process is amazing. It's bad of me to recommend because it's, if you have no intention of changing jobs, it's kind of a waste of their resources. But maybe you decide, hey, actually, I got an offer from this. It might open your mind to new possibilities, and I think that's great. And then quickly, the paid ones, of course, you can practice with a teacher one-on-one. That will force you to integrate it into your lifestyle because if you're paying for something, you're more likely to use it. So if you pay a teacher one-on-one, it's quite expensive. It's very expensive. Well, it depends on how good the teacher is, but it tends to be expensive. And so you're going to feel, oh, I'd better use this. This is a big benefit for me. I'd better not waste it, right? So that's kind of forcing you to get into a regular routine. You can join schools and online programs, and they have maybe group classes, things like that. Coaching sessions, unrelated to English, perhaps you can pay for. There are life coaches. There's therapy. There's one, I think, called BetterHelp, and you can get a therapist to talk about things. Again, they're not giving you English feedback, but you might get a benefit in terms of therapy, thinking about your life and maybe some of your life choices and problems you're going through, so you can achieve something there. Doing that in English is also practicing your English. So that is a great way to work on your speaking skills and your confidence. But again, you're not getting feedback there probably on your English. And then paid clubs. There's some clubs you can join which are not free, similar to the online meetups. I don't know the difference between them, but I know that they are out there. So those are just a few ideas. Now, I challenge you to start. What are you waiting for? Why would you not start looking for ways to integrate English into your daily life? It's very important. My challenge is to just go for it. Jump in the deep end. First, change your default language to English. Maybe you do that on your phone. Maybe you do it on your computer. I want you to start thinking in English. I want you to immerse yourself in English. Go to your phone settings, change your language to English. On your computer, do the same thing. You know where things are. It's just a change in mindset. Make English your primary mental language for a while. Engage with the world in English. Like I talked about, I gave you a lot of ideas for doing that. Find interests that force you to use English. When you're in those maybe groups or playing Magic or playing video games, you're thinking in English at the same time. That's very important. Combine interests with English. And then, if you can, try to participate in the culture. Don't just think about it as, hey, I'm learning language. No, think about it as I'm participating in a culture, English-speaking culture. And if you think of it that way, you're going to be more immersed, you're going to be more open-minded, you're going to learn more, you're going to make more connections, you're going to change your mindset, and that's going to make everything much, much easier. So that's my challenge to you. If you haven't already done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, and also check out my full courses in the links in the description. Okay. So that's lifestyle. That's lifestyle. See, we have some people joining. That's great. Luba's here, and Trin is here from Vietnam. Luba's on the bus, listening something. Luba says, I always listen to something when I'm cooking, when I'm on my way home. So it's exactly what I'm doing now. Participating in a speaking club is my regular activity. So Luba is if she doesn't mind me talking about her, I've known Luba for a long time. She's taken a lot of my courses. So Luba is an example of, I think, maybe the ideal example of building a lifestyle in English. She wasn't able to use a lot of English before, and then when she decided to start learning English, she just went completely all in. And that attitude, I think, is amazing. Of everything connecting somehow to English, participating actively, using English as much as possible, right? And consuming a lot of things as well. Not just seeing learning as this one activity that I do. If you do it that way, you're going to be it's very narrow, it's very limited. It's not a great way to do it. But Luba listens to courses. She watches a lot of videos on YouTube. She reads things in English. She seeks out opportunities to practice speaking. She's involved in a lot of groups, which she participates very actively in. She's not afraid to share her opinions, and she's not afraid to get into discussions. So it's not like a sort of, I'll just compose this perfect paragraph and put it into this group, and then I'm done. No, she'll actively participate, engage in the conversation, there's a big difference between those two, right? She has managed, and this is something I'd love to talk to Luba more about, but she has managed to find language partners who are native English speakers, which is a huge advantage. And I believe it took a lot of time. I don't want to speak for Luba, but I think it took a lot of time and searching and seeking to find language partners who she speaks with very frequently. They have calls together, they talk together, and the amount of practice that she's able to get in that way is, of course, astounding, amazing. And the amount you can learn there's cultural exchange going on, there's language exchange going on. It's fantastic. She also uses a lot of different apps for practicing specific things. She often, in our Discord group, for example, she'll talk about, she's shared about her use of Elsa Speak, which is a pronunciation app, and she's been using that for a while. So I hope I'm not sharing too much, Luba, but it's stuff that you've put out there, so I think it's okay to share. The point is, right, there's not only, I think she's a great example, because there's not only one point of contact or one way to engage. There are many. Engaging your listening, engaging by listening to a lot of things, watching videos, listening to courses, watching courses, listening to podcasts, engaging your English brain, connecting to the world in English, right? Having discussions in English, all of that. Working on specific skills, pronunciation, listening skills, grammar skills, taking courses on specific topics, for example, right? Culture, the cultural background and speaking practice, having language partners, practicing speaking, cultural exchange, asking questions. All of that stuff is crucial. And so, learn from that example. I think that's really important. If you can do that, you are going to see progress much more quickly. So, let me hold on. I need to look out the window. I have a window beside me. I don't know what it is. Maybe my propane. So, if you guys have questions, now's a good time to ask. I get propane refills. So my heating is based on propane in my house. These big propane tanks. And a truck actually comes, fills the propane, sends me a bill, and then they leave. And that's how I get my heat. All right, I'm going to read through some questions here. If you have any other questions about grammar, lifestyle, habits, culture, feel free to let me know. I'm happy to take questions. I'll do my best. Max said, it's so easy to listen to you, Luke, because of your pronunciation, but I think it's kind of a trap. Yes, that's my evil plan, is to trap you. In language. I've just connected to your Discord. Are you going to post many stuff in English there? I share stuff, but right now the Discord is primarily for just talking, chatting, and I think it will evolve over time. It will become what it becomes. I'm hoping that people, really take initiative and think of new ways to engage, and I do share resources there, but really it's, for now, just a place for people to have sort of a dedicated English space where they can discuss things, chat about things. You reminded me to open up the voice channel. If anyone is interested in speaking or asking questions, by speaking, you can hop into the Discord and ask questions or share something. You can share stuff, whatever you want to do. Share something in the Discord. I want to make sure I have my sound on. I think so. Okay. Luba says, thank you, Luke. I would mention the same activities if I could join the voice chat. Okay, I'm glad I represented those. Fairly. If anyone wants to join the voice chat Discord, I have opened that up. Don't be shy. Now's the time. I think I can unmute. There we go. That's not what I want. All right, we'll see if that works. Hopefully it does. Okay. I was before, I found a paper in Nature that is also focused on habits, and there's a really interesting angle to this Nature paper and the findings in Nature. So I want to share that quickly, actually. Let's hop over here. So this paper, called Inhibitory Control Hinders Habit Change, is, I can't pretend I completely understood all of it, because the way that they conducted the experiment is a little complicated. It involves setting up these learning phases, and I'm not enough of an expert on this type of psychological research to say, I completely understand the way that it happens, but it seems possibly like it's a little artificial because they're doing very measurable tasks, and I'm not sure that real life habits work like that. But they wanted to see how habits change and whether it's effective to try to change a habit by stopping something, or it's easier to just add habits in the right direction, right? And then kind of hope that the old habits fall off. So I'll just read you the abstract here, and I do think the findings are quite interesting. And again, this is just one study. You know how these things are. You can find a study to support pretty much anything these days, which is just the state of, science and research. But it is interesting. Our habits constantly influence the environment, often in negative ways that amplify global environmental and health risks. Hence, change is urgent. There's some assumptions built into that, but fair enough. To facilitate habit change, inhibiting or preventing unwanted behaviors appears to be a natural human reaction. That means normally we think if we want to stop something, we inhibit it. We say, no, I won't do that anymore. Smoking or taking drugs or throwing your trash out the window when you're driving, I don't know. We say, okay, no more. That's what inhibit means. I won't do that anymore. I'll stop. Okay? To facilitate habit change, inhibiting unwanted behaviors appears to be a natural human reaction. Here, we use a newly developed experimental design to test how inhibitory control affects two key components of changing, rewiring, habit-like behaviors in healthy humans. So again, inhibitory control is saying, I won't do that anymore. Okay. So habit-like behaviors, things that are like habits or things in your lifestyle that you're just used to doing, brushing your teeth, that sort of thing. We found that, this is the key part, we found that while the new behavior was acquired, the old behavior persisted and coexisted with the new. Critically, inhibition hindered both overcoming the old behavior and establishing the new one. So let me explain what that means. That's, I think, really important, really interesting. While new behavior was acquired, the old behavior persisted and coexisted with the new. So they wanted to teach people in these experiments a new behavior, and teaching people a new behavior worked, but the new behavior didn't get rid of the old behavior. Then they wanted to try to get rid of old behaviors, inhibit them, stop them, but they found that first of all, didn't work. It didn't help them change the habit, and it actually prevented them from getting new behaviors. So when they're trying to inhibit old behaviors, not only are they not stopping them, the habits, but they're also not able to learn new ones. Whereas if you're not doing anything and you just learn a new behavior, at least you're learning a new behavior. In other words, you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day and you don't run. So instead of trying to stop smoking, you start running. So you run every day and you are smoking. So now you're doing both things. And since running is a good behavior, good habit, at least you're doing one good thing, one bad thing. But if you try to stop smoking only, then you're not going to be able to stop probably, and you won't be able to establish the new habit of running every day. That's very interesting. Our findings highlight that suppressing unwanted behaviors, that means pushing them down, I won't. Suppressing unwanted behaviors, perhaps like smoking, is not only ineffective, but may even further strengthen them. What? So that's even worse. That means that seems a little extreme. I mean, there are people who have stopped smoking using quitting as the method, but okay. But what that's saying is basically, if you try to stop smoking by suppressing it, I won't smoke. Instead of smoking 2 packs a day, eventually you'll be smoking 3 packs a day. Maybe. They strengthen. Strengthening would be maybe making it somehow worse or even harder to change. It doesn't mean doing more of those things. It doesn't mean smoking 3 packs a day, but it means somehow it's even harder to get rid of now. Meanwhile, actively engaging in a preferred behavior appears indispensable for its successful acquisition. So, if you're actively engaging in what you want, that works. Our design could be used to uncover new approaches, how new approaches affect the cognitive basis of changing habit-like behaviors. So that's really interesting. Again, it's just one study, it's just one paper, and I think, as you can see, the way they did the experiments here, the learning phases, they're learning very yes, no, sort of this goes here behaviors, and so lifestyle things are a little bit more fluid. I'm not so sure it's that clear cut, but it is still very interesting to think about. So maybe that means focus more on the stuff that you want to do rather than focusing all your energy on trying to stop things that you don't want to do. And I think that's great for English learning as well. I mean, just start doing more things that are good, watch more TV shows, read more books, learn more grammar, take more courses. That's great, which is good. Okay. I guess my notifications are on. Someone says, so guys, now if you have questions, if you want me to answer any questions, I'm happy to do so. Fabricio says, thank you for your videos. You're welcome. Evan, how can I connect? Evan, in the chat, or in the description rather, there is a there's a link to Discord which you can join. I see we have a few new people here who've joined since. Crystal and Yoring and Natasha. And so if you want to ask questions or add anything to the lifestyle stuff, you're welcome to do that. Of course, you'll be doing so for all to hear, but, why not challenge yourself? No pressure, of course. It's not for the faint of heart. If you're having trouble joining, Evan, I don't know, I have the voice channel open. So you should see something called voice channel. I currently only see myself in the voice channel, so you have to actually click on it to join. We're going to be going over a phrasal verb soon, so look forward to that. We're going to be talking about go back, which is more complicated than you might think. I think it's an interesting one. Hello, Natasha. Welcome. Oh, Natasha did join the voice channel. Natasha, can you hear me okay? I think you have to unmute. Okay, maybe Natasha doesn't want to speak. That's fine. That's okay. No pressure, guys. No pressure. Okay. Well, I'll give it a minute or two, and then I'm going to get into go back. And once I do that, I'm not going to be opening the voice channel. So, unless you have examples you want to practice, which I will be open to. And then I might, if we have time, go into a book review. I recently finished a very interesting book, and I want to talk a little bit about it and actually recommend it to those who might be into that kind of thing. Okay. All right. Well, I think we'll then get into. Go back. Pop over here. Okay, I'm going to mute the voice channel. Feel free to hop in there if you want later on. How do you manage your voice without feeling tired? I don't. My voice often feels tired. I do feel tired. I don't manage. I feel exhausted. All right. Fun stuff. Get ready for go back. Make sure my pen is working here. Yeah. All right. What is the first thing you think when I say go back? It's interesting because it might be different for different people. Because go back has different meanings, and we're going to talk about them with examples. And then I'm going to challenge you to come up with examples of your own and share them with me. I really want to take a look. I want to see if you can use go back in all of its different uses and meanings. So what comes to mind first? If I say go back as a command, does that make you want to do anything in particular? If so, what? Well, okay, let's talk about it. The basic meaning is often return. This is often the most common meaning that people think about, to return. And in fact, it can be used in the same way as return in many cases, but certainly not all cases. For example, I might return a book to the library, but I can't say, I'm going to go back a book to the library. You can't just replace it like that. Now you can say, I'm going to return to the library, and I'm going to go back to the library. So there it's exactly the same. So we can return a thing, but we can't go back a thing. If we're talking about the thing that we're going to take, right, we would return it to the library. But if we're doing it, we go back, then we can say it is the same as return. Confused? I hope so. So I think the best way, as usual, when we talk about phrasal verbs like go back, the best way to get a sense for these is to look at tons and tons and tons and tons of examples. So let's get started with our first, I would say, and this is just my opinion, I would say our simplest meaning, okay? I went back home after 2 a.m. and immediately fell asleep. Going back home after years abroad was a shocking experience. I'd love to go back to India someday. I had to go back to see if they had my card. Maybe we should go back and ask again. Okay, so this is all being used, all of these examples, we're using go back in a similar way. But there are nuances here, of course, and we have to explore that a little bit. I went back home after 2 a.m. and immediately fell asleep. So what this means is I was at home, okay, and then I went somewhere, let's call it a party, I don't know, right? And here's the party. And then at 2 a.m., or after 2 a.m., it could be 2:01 or 2:30, I returned to my home. So this is the time that I left, okay? That means I started here. So when you say go back, you're suggesting your origin or point of origin, where you're beginning from, right? To go back to there is to return to there because you've been there before. But if I say, I got back home after 2 a.m., this is just a side point, but very important to note the difference. Then it's different than this. The meaning is different. If I say I got back home after 2, then the time that I returned is after 2. So maybe I went back home after 1:30 and I got back home after 2. So you see the went back is about when I left and got back is about when I actually arrived home. That's an important distinction. Going back home after years abroad was a shocking experience. Going back home, so where are you going? Home. This home probably is not specifically about your house or the town where you grew up, but perhaps home being your home country. So you were abroad for several years, after maybe 3 or 4 years, and then you returned to your country. You're deciding to call your country home. Some people do that, some people don't, but that's where you're from. For example, I would call the United States home because that's where I'm from, probably. But maybe after living in England for many years, I would call England home again, or for the first time. That's a side point as well. Okay, so going back home after years abroad was a shocking experience. I'm returning after perhaps years, and again, we're not talking about a house, but for this one, I went back home. We probably are talking about a house. The house where I live is my home. I'd love to go back to India someday. I'd love to go back to India. That means I've been there. I enjoyed it. I haven't been there in a while. I want to return. Okay? Is it the same as saying I'd love to visit India someday? Not quite. I'd love to visit India again someday. So we have to add that again there because that's what go back means. Go back means I was there before in this case. I had to go back to see if they had my card. This happened to me recently. There was a restaurant and I left and I got to somewhere else and then I realized, I left my card somewhere. I don't have my credit card. So I went back. I returned to the restaurant and said, hello, did you see a card? And they did have it recently. So that happened to me. So I returned. I had to go back. Maybe we should go back and ask again. Maybe you got rejected for a loan or something like that. And something was rejected. And then you forgot some important information. Oh, yeah, maybe if I mentioned this, they wouldn't have rejected me. So you get rejected. No, and then you leave, and then you think, oh, yeah, and then you go back to where you were, and you then tell them the new thing, and then they reject you again, or they don't. Okay, so try 1 or 2 examples of those. I'd like to see them, but we need to keep going. We need to keep moving. So let's go to our second set of examples. We have 4 sets of examples to go through. 4 sets of examples. Can you believe that? I can. I'm going back to work on the 22nd of next month. She went back to her book after lunch. Please go back to sleep. Could we go back to what you mentioned earlier? I'll never go back to hard drugs. Okay. So now we might think, okay, wait, this is kind of the same thing, right? Yes, it is. But now the things we're talking about are a little bit more abstract. Before, we were talking about returning to locations, going back home, going back to the bank, going back to India. We're talking about physically in space. We go somewhere, we stop, we turn around, and we return, right? Okay. Here we're doing the same thing, but we're talking about things that we may not physically, in the same way, geographically return to. We're not actually walking necessarily. So I'm going back to work on the 22nd. Maybe you work at home. You're home now, and you still say, I'm going back to work. So where are you returning to exactly? You're not returning anywhere physically necessarily. You're returning to your job because you're on break. Maybe you're on maternity leave. You have 4 months for maternity leave. You had a baby. Then you're done. So it's time to work again. You were working there before. You went on leave. Now you're going back to work. If you work at home, then physically you're not going anywhere. You're in the same place, but you're still going back to work because it's about a shift back to what you're doing, not about where you're going, okay? Physically where you're going, I mean, right? She went back to her book after lunch. Okay, this means she was reading. It doesn't mean she walked across the room, ate lunch, and then walked back across the room to where her book was located. It could be that, but that's not what it's focusing on. It's focusing on her continuing to read. She was reading, then she took a break for lunch, and then she kept reading. That's what going back to her book means. It means returning to the activity, not physically where the book is located in the room. Because again, she could walk over to the table, eat lunch, and walk back to the sofa where she's reading. Or she could be sitting on the sofa. Someone could bring her lunch. She could eat it with the book in her hand, right? She could eat lunch on the book. Maybe the food is on the book. She eats on the book. She's still not reading, right? She's eating. Then someone takes the plate away. She never leaves the sofa. And she now opens the book again and continues reading. You would still say she went back to her book after lunch, okay? It's not about where she's going. Please go back to sleep. This is a state or condition. Sleeping, wake up, making noises. Please go back to sleep. Someone tells you because they're annoyed by you to go back to sleep. This is kind of a command or a request. And it really, I think, highlights the importance of the difference between these two we've been talking about. This is, you can't physically go to a sleep or something. No, you can return to a bed, go back to bed. Maybe you're not in bed. Yeah, okay. But go back to sleep. That is what you're doing. That is an activity. And by the way, you could say, go back to reading. She went back to reading. You could say the ing there, reading after lunch. Please go back to bed would also be okay. This means you're not in bed though. That's important. Could we go back to what you mentioned earlier? Okay, so now this is totally different. Now we're in a conversation. We're still in the conversation. So you mentioned A, and then we keep talking and we finally get to point B. These are things you're talking about, topics, right? Apples, bananas. These are very important topics. Bananas and cats. Okay, so now we're on cats, and I say, okay, wait, could we go back to what you mentioned earlier? I either want to talk about bananas or apples there. So going back here is returning in the conversation. Imagine this sort of road with topics, apples, bananas, cats. And we go, now that we're on cats, we start talking about apples again, or we start talking about bananas again, because we've passed those topics, but now we're going to return to those topics, okay? I'll never go back to hard drugs. This is, again, about addiction. Hard drugs you're addicted to, you can't stop, you never go back, means you were addicted, now you're not addicted anymore, and you don't want to ever return to that condition you were in, where you were deeply addicted and unhealthy and you had a terrible lifestyle. So you'll never go back to that condition. And the drugs represent that condition. All right. Moving on. We've covered 2. Now see if you can come up with, let's just say 2. 2 examples for this. Again, we're not talking about going back to a physical place. We're talking about a state, a condition, an activity, something a little more abstract. 2 examples. I would like to check those out as well. Okay, now, if I could go back to the Neolithic, I'd want to visit Göbekli Tepe. This song takes me back to when I was a kid. The most famous skyscrapers in Manhattan go back to the early 20th century. Kevin and I go back at least 10 years. We go way back. Okay, so now we are talking about time. Now, the underlying idea here has been the same. We're going to kind of talk about an exception here in a minute, but the underlying idea is a return. But we think of return in different ways. The physical meaning of walking back to where you were before, the abstract meaning of returning, for example, to a book, an activity, sleep, for example. And now we're talking about time. So this is an age called the Neolithic. It's a period of time, right? Broadly, it's been called the Stone Age, or part of the Stone Age. Stone tools. I'd want to visit Göbekli Tepe. That is a site that has been unearthed in Turkey, and it's ancient. I think it's about 11,500 years old, and it would be so cool if I had a time machine to visit the time when those giant stone pillars were being built. So interesting, right? If I could go back to this time, so I'm returning on the timeline. Here we are. Now we're here, and I'd like to go back and see Göbekli Tepe. This song takes me back to when I was a kid. So, this is a common expression we used to talk about, nostalgia. And nostalgia is this feeling of returning to the past in memory, and maybe it's bittersweet. Something feels warm and cozy and comfortable, but also a little sad because it's gone, right? So when you hear a song you used to often listen to when you were a kid and you haven't heard it in a while, and you hear it, it's as though you're being transported back. We're not actually talking about a time machine here. Maybe we could call it memory, right? The song is transporting you in memory back to when you were a kid, back to high school, back to my wedding day, back to my wedding day, right? Oops. Oops. Oh, hold on. Okay. Sorry about that. The most famous skyscrapers in Manhattan go back to the early 20th century. So now this is a little different as well. There's a thing that's there now. We're talking about something that currently exists. And we're talking about when it was created, right? This goes back to. It could be the origin of this, for example, a style of music. So maybe there's a new song, but it is in a tradition, in a style or a genre that goes back 300 years. Oh, this is a really interesting song you've written for this movie. It's classical. And this style goes back to the mid-18th century, right? So the song doesn't, but the style does. So there's this continuous thing that stretches into the past, and it goes back to, and then usually it's the point of origin. Usually it's the point of origin. The point of origin. So if we talk about the Empire State Building, the Chrysler Building, those two buildings in Manhattan were actually being built at the same time. They're actually a competition when they were building those two. And the Chrysler Building thought they won, and then right at the last minute, they had inside of the Empire State Building, they had this spire that they were hiding. And then once the Chrysler Building had finished, they raised the spire up from the Empire State Building, and it was taller because they were competing to see which was taller. Anyway, those are being built in the 1930s, around there, I think, mid-1930s. So early 20th century is when they go back to. And they're still there. Still very famous buildings. Kevin and I go back at least 10 years. We go way back. Okay. So if you want to say specifically how long a friendship has lasted, right? Usually we're talking about people we know well, colleagues and friends in particular. Not usually family members, because usually you're with family members from birth, right? So when you were born, you were surrounded by family. So you wouldn't say of a family member, we go way back. Yeah, of course. You've probably been around them since you were a baby. So usually it's colleagues and friends and people we've known for a long time. If it's 2 weeks, we won't say, we go back 2 weeks. Usually we're emphasizing that it's a long period of time. So I have a good friend, Kevin. I've known him for a very long time, over 10 years. So if I say we go back 10 years, that doesn't mean we're traveling backwards in time. That means our friendship began over 10 years ago. And often people use the expression, we go way back. Oh yeah, me and Kevin, we go way back. That's kind of how long we've known each other. All right? So we're talking about time here. Again, see if you can come up with 2 examples that fit this basic meaning, okay? Give me 2. I want to see them. Now, we talk about our last set of go back examples. I'll read through them and then we'll talk about them. These are kind of mixed, not a single theme here, a couple of different things. It's hard to trust you when you're always going back on your word. You told me you had been riding an elephant at the time. Now you're going back on what you said. Once you've had fast internet, it's hard to go back. How far back does this tunnel go? Are you back? Okay, so it's hard to trust you when you're always going back on your word. This is about commitments, promises. If you say to someone, I'm going to do this, and you don't do it, you maybe go back on your word. If you promise something and then you don't live up to your promise, we say you go back on your word. So going back on a commitment or a promise is going back on your word. You've said you will do something and then you don't do it. So you went back on what you said you'll do, and now this whole thing has been canceled, and now I don't trust you. You went back on your word. That's the most common way to say that. But we can go back in other ways. That's not necessarily a lie. Maybe it's misremembering. You told me you had been riding an elephant at the time. Now you're going back on what you said. So maybe I was telling a story and I was a little too into it and I added a detail, and it's not that I was lying, but I just forgot at the time because I was into the story. I mentioned I was riding an elephant. Then later you ask me about it and I say, oh no, I wasn't riding an elephant. And then you say, well, you said you were riding an elephant. Now you're going back on what you said. Now that could be because I deliberately lied, or it could be that I misspoke before. And actually, now I'm being honest. It's not that I was lying before. I just got lost in the details, right? Or I remembered something incorrectly, or things happen, right? So I'm going back on what I said. The key phrase here is what you said. What you said. Again, not necessarily a lie, sometimes misremembering things, sometimes correcting the record, sometimes just a mix-up of some kind, right? Many different reasons for that one. So this one is about dishonesty and lack of trust, and this one is about getting the story straight, right? Once and for all. Now this is about being something hard to go back, is about things we get and we don't want it to be worse again. So if you've experienced internet, gigabit internet, right? Then if you have to use slow internet again after that, it's more painful. Before you were on 30 megabit internet, okay? Then you get gigabit and you're used to just watching giant 4K movies instantly. Then for some reason you're at a hotel or maybe you visit someone and they have 30 megabit and it seems slow. Okay, once you've had fast internet, it's hard to go back. So there you're going back to a previous thing that you had before, but because you've had this now, this is hard to go back to because you're not used to it and it's not comfortable. But some things could be easy to go back to. For me, it was very easy to go back to living in an apartment. Maybe you were living in an apartment, then you got a house, then you sold your house, then you're living in the apartment again. For me, it was very easy to go back to that. So it could be difficult to go back or easy to go back. It's kind of a previous condition or a previous thing that you had before. How far back does this tunnel go? So this is physically backwards. How far back does it go? So we've really separated these words here. This one is a stretch to even say it fits into the phrasal verb structure, right? We just have the words go and back. But the reason I mention it is when I answer the question, I will say, it goes back 30 meters. So when I answer it in particular, it is in the same order, right? So we have to know this one as well. So there's a tunnel. We're here at the entrance of the tunnel. I can see that it goes way back there. I can't see how far. So I ask the question, how far back does it go? You're a local, you know, so you say it goes back 30 meters, right? Now, if we enter the tunnel, then we say how far back we go, but maybe we don't go all the way. So we went back 20 meters into the tunnel and then decided to turn around. Okay, that doesn't mean we went all the way into the tunnel, though. Okay? Are you back? Now, this could be a number of different things, and I mentioned it because it can be used in so many different ways. Maybe someone just, in the middle of a conversation, their eyes glaze over and that you can see that they're lost in thought. And they go like this, and you say, oh, are you back? So that means you're returning your attention to the conversation, to what's going on. So that would be a way to say, you were daydreaming, are you back, right? Or someone has come back from a vacation, are you back from vacation? Or someone has come back to a restaurant, and you're a waiter there. Ah, are you back? And maybe asking that in a jokey way, right? Maybe someone left the city and used to live near you, and they left the city, and then you know that they moved away, and then 2 years later you see them in the city again, and you say, are you back? Meaning, did you move back here because you used to live here before? I thought you moved away. And they say, oh, I'm just visiting some friends. I haven't moved back. There you might say, are you back? Right. There are a lot of different ways we could use that one. So again, 2 examples from this one. So totally we should have 8 examples. I challenge you to try all of these. Pop them into, if you like, pop them into the community in Discord. Pop them into the chat or the comments. I would love to check them out. And again, the best way to learn this stuff is to make examples right away. That's your way of burning it into your memory, making sure that it sticks so that you don't forget it. Because as you've seen, there are a lot of different ways to use go back. All right? If you want to learn more about this sort of thing, idioms, phrases, you're welcome to check out my courses in the links in the description. And also, if you haven't done so, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. All right. Why you left your keys inside the cupboard? Well, I need to see go back. Okay. Papu says, I left my keys inside the cupboard. I need to go back to get. Oh, and then right at the very end, you missed the last word. Now, Papu, can you correct that for me? One word wrong. One word is wrong there. Only one word. Otherwise, it's very good. I want to see your examples, and I'm happy to check them for you. Okay, so you got to pay attention to, you really got to pay attention to agreement here. Papu has a great example. I left my keys inside the cupboard, and then this should be a period, not a comma, a period. Okay, period there. Imagine a period. Oh, why can't I mark that? What the heck? Okay, there's a period there. Anyway, I need to go back to get it. Whenever you're talking about a noun, make sure you're paying attention to if the noun is plural, uncountable, singular, whatever it is. Go back to get. You said keys, right? So keys, more than one key. One key, 2 keys. Keys. So if we're talking about keys, and that's more than one, when we want to replace those keys with a pronoun, thank you, brain. Thank you, brain. If you want to replace that with a pronoun, what is it? If it's one thing, it might be it. All right? And you say, in the example, get it, right? But if we're talking about keys and it's more than one, we should use them. Them. And you might say, wait, I thought them was only for people. Nonsense. Them is also for things. I need to get them. My shoes. I left my shoes. Get them. Thank you. Nasi. Excellent. I'd like to see more examples if you have them. I'll open up the voice channel once again, just in case anyone wants to try a spoken example. Right. You're welcome to do that. Okay, I see Natasha here again. No pressure, Natasha, but if you have an example you want to try, you're welcome to. Papu says, thanks for the correction. Absolutely. My pleasure. Mikel says, it was me. Third example, I'd means I would or I had. That's a good question. Let me find my example here. If I could go back to the Neolithic, is that the one you're talking about there? I'd want to visit Göbekli Tepe. That I'd is I would. And Heckle, that's a great point to bring up, right? Because it could be I had or I would, right? If you say I'd, that could be I had. I would, I had. I would, I had. How do you know if it's one or the other? If I'd is I would or I had. It completely depends on the context of the sentence. You have to know which one it is based on the sentence structure, based on the grammar of the sentence. So, if I say, if I could go back to the Neolithic, you cannot say I had. It doesn't make grammatical sense. Right? I had is used for other things. We're talking about a hypothetical introduced by if I could. So that if there and the should trigger your mind to say, oh, hypothetical. That's one of the conditionals. I remember that, right? So then it's going to be would, because that is used to talk about hypotheticals. I had would be to talk about not possessions, right? But if we're using something like present perfect tense. So I could say, past perfect tense. I'd been waiting. So this is classic past perfect tense structure, short for I had been waiting. Present perfect would be have been, and you can there say I've been waiting. That's present perfect. You're still waiting. Past perfect tense would be I'd been or I had been waiting. And there we're talking about, that's a grammatical structure. Time before, when I was waiting, it had been a period of time and then it ended when I stopped waiting for some reason, right? It's a tense. It's a grammatical tense. Now, it's important to note there that if you say had, it cannot be the had that means possession. So possession is to have something. You cannot say, I'd a rabbit when I was a kid. No. We only use I'd, meaning I had, grammatically. We don't use I had in terms of having things or possessions. So we have to say, I had a rabbit when I was a kid. We cannot say, I'd a rabbit when I was a kid. Okay? So to answer your question broadly, pay attention to the context. I can be I would or I had. I had is grammatical, not possession, and I would is also grammatical, but used for, generally speaking, hypotheticals or the subjunctive mood. All right, see if we got any other examples here. Brave souls, brave souls. Few people are brave enough to get on the voice chat. I'd love, yeah. All right, any other questions? Any other examples? All right. Okay. Well, I think that's all for today. Let's see what we've covered today. We've talked about how to build a lifestyle. We talked about phrasal verbs. Had one or two questions pop up. I wish I could go back in my school days. I wish I could go back to my school days, not in. I wish I could go back to my school days. Go back to, not go back in. You would go back in time, a general thing, and go back to a specific time. Okay, so, well, what can I say? Thank you all for joining. I hope you learned something. I hope you start working on your English lifestyle. If you haven't started this, I strongly encourage you to at least begin thinking about how to build English into your lifestyle. If you have questions about that or you need help with that, feel free to reach out to me. You can also join the Discord if you have questions. People who ask questions usually get answers to questions, and people who get answers to questions usually learn faster. I am amazed that most I find English learners just sort of sit passively and listen. You're not getting the most out of learning. If you actively engage with what you're learning, you ask questions, you're really thinking about something, you're going to learn faster. But who am I to tell you what to do? All right? If you haven't already done so, feel free to hit the like button. That really supports the channel. It's a small action you can take, which really makes a big difference in recommending my stuff to others. That is, if you're watching. If you want to listen, you can go to the links in the description and you'll see a link that will take you to the podcast. You can listen on Spotify, you can listen on Apple Podcasts, or wherever you like to listen to podcasts. And let's see, what else? Join the Discord and check out the courses, of course. The Natural English Conversations course, as always, is free, so you can grab that one. That should be the first link. And that is it. I will be back on Friday at the usual time, perhaps a little bit earlier, in fact. Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm going to be actually trying to go for 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time instead of 12. That time, I think, actually works better. All right? So, thanks for joining. Hopefully, I will see you on Friday. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Stay safe. Bye-bye.